You have cancer. 3 words that change a life forever. We would like to offer another 3 words. Be an overcomer. Welcome to the 1% Podcast, where our conversations with other cancer warriors, survivors, and caregivers allows us to give you that extra boost you need to face your challenge head on, live life from a new perspective, and forge a path that keeps you moving free and clear. Now, welcome your host and cancer survivor, Truett Taylor.
Welcome to today's episode of the 1% Podcast, the show where we interview young adults who are battling or surviving an unexpected cancer diagnosis. You are not alone, and I promise, by consuming today's content, your soul will be fed with the hope, courage, and inspiration you need to keep fighting for today. I'm excited to be on your journey with you today. If you haven't done so already, be sure to head over to 1percentpodcast.com to sign up for our email list to see the latest news and updates for all our guests on the show. You can also check us out on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at 1% Podcast. If you want to join in on some of our discussions, please join our Facebook group, the 1% Podcast. To contact me directly for content, questions, or booking events, you can email me at info@1percentpodcast.com. Today's episode is the 40th episode of the 1% Podcast, and I can think of no better person to be on the show than one of the original pioneers of the cancer podcast community. His name is Lee Silverstein. He has a podcast called We Have Cancer, and Lee was one of the first people that I ever found when I was searching through all the podcasts of cancer communities to actually host a cancer podcast that talked about the real human side of cancer. So Lee's going to be my guest on the show today, but before we get into Lee's interview, let's go over today's 1% moment of truth. Today's 1% moment of truth is about community. Community is described in several different ways. It's typically described as a group of people who live in the same area, such as a city, town, or neighborhood. But I like to think of community as a combination of these people in close proximity to a town or a church that have the same common interests, such as food or a book club or a mother's club or a cancer club or something along those lines. I feel community is not just a group of people with common interests, but a community is a true group of encouragers. I don't know about you, but there are some days where I just feel down and out. I feel discouraged. So I need a community, whether it's my friends, family, or even neighbors, to encourage me maybe when I'm beating myself up just a little bit. There's a verse in Hebrews that says, "And let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another." As I was preparing for today's message, I began thinking about 3 different communities that I've joined in the past 10 years that have dramatically made a huge difference in my life. The first community I like to call my new friends community. Back in 2005, when I moved to Carrollton to finish up my college career at the University of West Georgia, I moved in with 3 total strangers. And over the first couple of months of us all living together, we decided, since we didn't know anyone and we barely knew each other, what better way to get to know people in our groups than to throw a huge party. So what we did is we put all our resources together and threw a monster party in the first couple of months of being students and being roommates. And the people that I met from that college, from that community, and from that party are some of my best friends today. All of us actually moved to the same town and are in the same circle and participate in the same community events, co-ed events, softball events, all those different things. So these people are like a second family to me. Not only did we meet in a small college town, we all moved to Atlanta and live in the same neighborhood today. And the reason I share this story is because whenever you move to a new city, maybe it's your first time somewhere, find a couple of close people that you connect with early, and you guys throw a party, invite all the people that you know, and mix and mingle and see exactly what kind of friendships and relationships will come out of that group. The second group that I joined over the past couple of years was a community group through Passion City Church. So mind, body, and spirit are the 3 most important things to me. And I had moved to Atlanta. I had gotten established. I had gotten a job. I'd finally settled in, bought a home, all those things, gotten married. And now it was time to really plant some spiritual roots somewhere. So if you're familiar with the city of Atlanta, it's a mixed group of people from all over the world. Most people that are in Atlanta aren't necessarily from Atlanta. So there's a lot of people with a lot of different views here, a lot of different backgrounds. And I just wanted to communicate with some people that had the same beliefs as I did and really join up with a spiritual community. And so I did some research and I found a group that was going to meet at this location close by. And I just went completely by myself. I actually wasn't even married at the time. So I just showed up. And I was so dreading the thought of going into this place. Because anytime you show up somewhere, you typically think everyone knows everyone. And you're the only person that doesn't know anyone. Because I walked in the door and everybody was talking. I was like, God, I'm the only person that doesn't know a single person here. Which I was completely wrong. And when I walked in, I was greeted by someone and several other people, and we all started talking. And then I was kind of just standing there by myself drinking something, and a guy walks up and starts talking to me. And he was brand new. He had moved from another state here and had taken a new job here in Atlanta. And he and I built a relationship and started talking, and I got to know his family and another group of people. And before you know it, over the next several months, I had a whole new group of friends. And being an adult, getting new friends and a new type of environment is a pretty hard thing to do. I think especially for guys. I know it's harder for us to share feelings and really connect with other people as we get older. But those relationships have been so significant in my spiritual growth, and I'm forever grateful for the opportunity to serve along those guys today. And finally, most recently, I've joined the online cancer community. By starting the podcast, I've been able to create a community over the past 5 months where I've joined up cancer warrior survivors and caregivers all together. And honestly, that wasn't my intention initially, but just bringing stories in from people all over and joining that online community of support, that network. I didn't have that whenever I was going through my cancer journey. So the very fact that I've been able to be a part of the Colorectal Cancer Alliance events and all the support groups and all the messages and all the different people that I've connected with all over the world over the past 5 months has been so astounding to me. So I'm telling you that because I want you to get involved with some kind of community group online. Now, there are good people and there are bad people in every community, and there's posts that you may read that may be kind of depressing, but most of the groups that I'm a part of are all positive. And there's people at all different types and different situations and different levels of their journey that you may be able to connect with at some point, depending on where you're at. So I'm highly encouraging everyone to jump online, find some cancer community groups out there, some support groups, some networks where you can pop in and out of whenever you need a moment or whatever you feel like offering encouraging words to other people, because I promise those words do not go void whenever you put them out there. They just bring so much back to you, and you feel way more connected, and it really helps you process all the thoughts and feelings that you're having currently. And there's no way that you can help someone else without receiving a blessing to come back on you. So with all that being said, let's talk about Mr. Lee Silverstein. Lee is the host of the We Have Cancer podcast and a huge advocate in the colon cancer community. After being diagnosed at 5 years old with a rare form of pediatric kidney cancer, Lee instinctively knew that his cancer journey wasn't over. At age 50, for his first routine colonoscopy, Lee discovered he had stage 4 colon cancer. 3 years after his new diagnosis, Lee discovered that no one was doing a cancer podcast that was really sharing the human side of the cancer experience. So in February of 2015, the Colon Cancer Podcast was born. Over the past 4 years, Lee has interviewed over 100 cancer warriors, survivors, caregivers, and providers. Seeing the impact his story was having in the colon cancer community, Lee expanded his reach and changed the name of his show to We Have Cancer to include all other cancer communities as well. Lee is a phenomenal host and a huge asset to the entire cancer community. So join me in welcoming Mr. Lee Silverstein to the 1% Podcast.
Lee, welcome to the 1% Podcast, man. How's it going today?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me on to it. It's so great to connect with you after some time of talking about it. Glad we're able to pull it off.
I know you and I were just talking about something several months ago when I was just thinking of doing a podcast. I started searching for cancer podcasts, and you were the only one out there. And so I listened to a bunch of your episodes, and I was like, man, this just more confirms that, there needs to be more people out here reaching out to all the people who have cancer and telling their stories and being able to give people a hope. Because I listened to so many of your episodes, and we've had some of the same guests over time, which I think I only knew of one other person that had been on your show, which was Riley. But we've had other past guests that have all kind of been a part of this community. But just listening to your show, my wife and I used to listen. I was like, so this guy does what I want to do in a way, everybody has their different personalities and stuff, but just the way he tells the stories and the way he gives people, something to look forward to, because cancer is not an easy topic to talk about. And it's not something people, I say, enjoy talking about, the general public in a way, but us that have had it, that can speak about it, it just really offers people up a community that they wouldn't otherwise have in this world today, because, not everybody wants to go to support groups. Not everyone wants to be a part of that community. I think it's even harder for us men. It was for me. I didn't want to go to a support group, but being part of a podcast, I can listen in my own, and no one really knows about it, and connect with people that I maybe can't see. But it really, I'm sure you've gotten feedback over all the years you've been doing this, but you see how it brings people together and how it just helps people in their lowest moments, and to know they have an outlet, to have a resource. And I'm sure you've gotten a ton of accolades. I saw something recently about your show being one of the top cancer outlets to be out there and stuff. So that's a huge, effort in your part, and, something to obviously be proud of. And so it's just an honor for me to chat with you and pick your brain a little bit today and go into your story and let everybody know how great you are.
Well, I appreciate that, Truett, and you're right. And I started this 4 years ago, and would continue to check on Apple Podcasts and the various podcast platforms, and going, really, I'm the only one? There's plenty of room in the pool here for more. So thanks for jumping in, because you're right. People are looking for information, inspiration, and hope, and this is one way for them to get it. And and in the way they want to consume it.
Why don't we start by telling everyone, one of the first questions I ask people is, why is it important for you to share your story? So I'll say that to you, but why is it important for you to share other people's stories and have your own podcast about cancer?
We almost already answered the question. The fact that there really wasn't anybody doing a regularly produced podcast telling the human side of cancer. Mm-hmm. If you look online, there's several clinician to clinician type podcasts out there. But as you know, and as your audience knows, and my audience knows, when you hear those three words, you have cancer, your mind can go to a bad place. And the overwhelming feeling, and I know you hear this repeatedly on your show, is that feeling of loneliness. Yep. And just to the point you just made, it's a way to bring people together, to hear stories, just even sharing my own story, that on March 21st, it'll be my eight-year cancerversary. And for someone hopefully to listen to that and go, wow, 8 years, I didn't know that was possible.
Yeah.
I've interviewed 20-year survivors, and if someone can hear that, and that'll inspire them and motivate them to perhaps fight a little harder. Mm-hmm. I'm a little hesitant about using that word fight. That's a separate conversation. But if that inspires them, maybe that's a better word, then mission accomplished, right?
Yeah.
That people can get that hope and inspiration and realize that, no, they're not alone. And they're not the only one struggling with whatever the topic is we're discussing as well. Yeah.
There's a tremendous amount of power meeting someone where they're at in their journey, in the life cycle, because, as we both know, the life cycle of cancer, it can be different from day to day, whether you're in your high moments, low moments, scan anxiety, survivor's guilt, all those things that we talk about with people. You never know, what episode of the podcast can reach them exactly when they're at their need. So I think it's awesome that you do that. So let's talk a little bit about your cancer story. It's different always talking about your own story and stuff. Tell us a little bit about what your life was like prior to your cancer diagnosis.
Well, I'm going to throw this back at you. Are you going to talk about when I was diagnosed when I was 5 years old, or when I was diagnosed when I was 50 years old?
Well, you probably don't remember too much about
Yeah.
before you were 5, right?
And I don't say that to be a smart guy, but cancer has really been a part of my life, for most of my life.
Yeah.
And the gap in between when I had pediatric cancer and an adult was, it was a good life and 2 grown, wonderful sons. But I was I think if you took a step back, I was one of these people that was just kind of going through the motions of life, to be honest with you. And a lot happened in a very short period of time. I left a career of almost 30 years. Unfortunately, got divorced and was diagnosed with cancer and fell in love all within like 2.5, 3 years. This all happened. When I was diagnosed with colorectal cancer in March of 2011, I was just 3 months into a relationship with my now wife of 6 years. And this all happened, right at the beginning of our relationship. So certainly a dramatic twist, but a lot happening all at once. But at the same time, as I fast forward today, I tell people all the time that even with the cancer through it, these last 8 years have been the best years of my life.
Yeah. So I'm sure that was a big surprise to your now wife, correct? That when you guys first started going through the motions and the newness of a relationship, you throw an extra wrinkle in there and, take it or leave it. That's part of you, right? And obviously she responded the correct way because here you are several years later and you guys are happy and in love and she supported you the entire way.
Absolutely. And I'll never forget the exact moment we got the phone call. This all started, I turned 50. My doctor said, 50, guess what you get to do now? Time for a colonoscopy. And I had no symptoms. And she took me to the colonoscopy. And I don't know why, Truett, the alarm bells didn't go off. To this day, I'm still oblivious. When I woke up and the doctor said something about having trouble getting the scope all the way through, that should have freaked me out right at that moment, and it didn't. I'm still not sure why. It wasn't until a couple of days later when he called to tell me that he put a rush on the results that I went, why?
Right.
What's that about? And we were standing in the kitchen of my wife's home, now our home, and the phone call came in, and he had done an endoscopy at the same time because I was having some other issues. And when he said, I just want to let you know that the endoscopy was fine. And as soon as I heard that put that way, I knew the end was coming, right? The but. And then his next words were, do you know a surgeon? And that was like the 2x4, between the eyes.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, because I had cancer as a kid, I just felt like cancer and I would cross paths again at some point. Now I understand that didn't mean that I was walking around worried and, a hypochondriac or, a dark cloud over my head. I just had this feeling that I wasn't done with cancer yet, but it didn't impact my life. And then if that makes any sense. So my reaction was, okay, what do we got to do? And certainly I was upset, and Linda, my wife, certainly she was, a little bit more visibly upset at the time. Mm-hmm. But I'll never forget that phone call. Like I know everybody else feels the same way when they got that
seared in your mind. And it's like the more times I ask that question, everybody has a different response to that. But it's just something like it's a new chapter being written in your life, obviously, when you hear those words going forward. So what was your actual diagnosis whenever he went through everything with you?
It was initially stage 2 colon cancer.
Okay.
That was the initial diagnosis.
So what kind of, did they just do the colon resection for you, or what was the treatment with that?
The treatment was the colon resection. And then I went to the Moffitt Cancer Center in Tampa and got their opinion on what, if anything, we should do follow up. And the oncologist said, at stage 2, typically we say, let's just keep an eye on it because we don't feel that the benefits outweigh the risks of chemotherapy at that point. And I think it was about 6 weeks later, I'd taken Linda to her very first trip to New York City, and we were standing in Macy's Herald Square. And I always tell the story, if the nurse calls, it's good news. And if it's the doctor calls, and I hear, Lee, it's Dr. Strasberg, because he was calling with the results of the very first post-surgical CT scan. Mm-hmm. He said, there's a spot on your liver, but don't worry about it. Enjoy the rest of your vacation.
Right.
We'll take care of it when you get back. I'm like, that's easy for you to say. And so when I got back, they did a PET scan, and the PET scan was negative. Fast forward about 15 months. This was in September of 2011. That New Year's Eve, I asked Linda to marry me. And then December 1st, 2012, we got married, went on our honeymoon. And the week after my honeymoon was time for the next, can't remember, 3-month or 6-month scan. Mm-hmm. And they came back with the results. And understand, this was 17 days after we got married. And he said, that spot on your liver has gotten a little bigger. I want to do a biopsy. So right after Christmas, they did a biopsy. And on New Year's Eve, we had dinner reservations for our first married New Year's Eve together, 1 day shy of our 1-month anniversary. And we had just bought a bottle of champagne. I'll never forget, it was 4:00 and the phone rang again. And guess who it was? Again, Lee, Dr. Strasberg. And his exact words, I will never forget for the rest of the days I live. I hate calling you on New Year's Eve with this news, but that biopsy came back positive for cancer metastasis to your liver. And Linda and I joke, when we said in sickness and in health, we didn't mean now.
Not that fast,
that's like that's like when we get old, right? That's something you say for later, right? We didn't mean that we wouldn't even make it 30 days or 1 month, I should say, from our wedding day to have to deal with this stuff all over again. And
so what was worse for you, hearing the news that you had, stage 2 cancer to begin with, or the news that it had metastasized to your liver?
Oh, that's easy. They call that it had metastasized, because when we did the surgery, and then you go to the NCI Cancer Center in the whole state of Florida, and they tell you, "Oh, you're good. We'll just keep an eye on you," and you just go on with life. And like I said, we got engaged and we got married, and
right.
It's starting to fade out of your mind, and then. I think I always think of that line from the awful sequel to The Godfather Part 3. Just when I thought I was out, you sucked me back in. And that's exactly the way I felt. I was like, this can't be happening. I thought I was done.
Yeah.
And I've been dealing with it ever since.
So what did your wife think whenever she heard the news? What was her reaction?
Linda's amazing. She is always the picture of positivity. I mean, of course, we shed our tears, and then we looked at each other and said, we got dinner reservations in 2 hours. We got to go home and get dressed.
Right.
And I, how those memories pop up in Facebook on New Year's Eve, which was just at the time we're recording this, just, a week ago, she popped up that picture of us standing outside the restaurant after having dinner. A few hours after we got the news, and you could not tell from our smiles that we had just gotten this phone call 4 hours earlier. And so she keeps me grounded. She doesn't let me drift off the path of, having any kind of pity parties. And our joke to each other is always, we got, I'll use the word stuff. We got stuff to do. We're not going to just get us down. And that whole "we" is where the name of my podcast kind of came from, was that from that line, the "we." So that's what happened. And certainly that diagnosis of the metastasis was the toughest news, no doubt.
Yeah. Not everyone has a great support system, which I'm sure you found out over the years whenever they go through this. But for those of us who do, I didn't at the time. I'm a mother at the time, I would say. I was just fresh off a divorce myself. I got divorced and got cancer in the same year. So that wasn't the best year for me back in 2012. But I did have the support of my mother to help me through that. And I know you've got the support of Linda. What do you think that your life would be like if you had to face this by yourself?
I tell her all the time, on those days when we have a tough day, which are certainly really few and far between, I don't know. I don't know how I would have done it without her.
Mm-hmm.
I really don't. I'm fortunate like you. I'm very close with my parents. They don't live very far away, but they're in their 80s. I have 2 grown sons, and Linda has, so we say we have 3 sons between us. But one of my oldest is local. My youngest is up in New York, so I only have one that's nearby. And I don't know. I really don't know how I would have done it without her.
And this is maybe a weird question, but do you feel like having cancer makes your relationship better with her because you have more gratitude that she's in your life?
No doubt. And that's a great question. And I know that you see this and I see this in the people we talk to, that the impact that having this disease does on your outlook on life. And, it takes a whole lot more to get me stressed anymore than it used to. Not that I was a stressed person to begin with. I'm pretty chill anyway. But my gratitude and appreciation for just the littlest things in life is so magnified. And that's why I'm able to say that these last 8 years have been as good as they are because of that.
Yeah. I always feel like gratitude's the key to happiness, and happiness comes and goes, right? With emotions, all emotions change, right? But I feel like you can always manufacture some happiness by thinking about, things that you're grateful for, whether it's your career, your health, your life, your spouse, or whatever it is. Like, you can always manufacture some kind of happiness if that's what you need. And in those moments where you can't, maybe someone comes into your life, whether it's through a podcast or through a relative or someone you're close to, that can really help manufacture some of that happiness for you. And that's one great thing about, podcasting in a way is, we have the opportunity to manufacture some of that gratitude because, someone's story is always better and always worse than yours. And, again, no matter where you're at in the moment, where you're at in that cycle of cancer, you have an opportunity to be thankful for, where you're at. You've lived, 8 years, where we talk to people who don't live 8 months, after that situation. Yeah. And, your outlook, I feel like people that survive things survive for a reason that's way bigger than themselves. It's not a selfish reason why, some of us live longer than others and everything. You've had, a great time. You've met your wife. You guys are doing great things together. Your show's impacted thousands and thousands of people. So your illness has really benefited a lot of people in a lot of ways. And I'm sure if you could have written your own story, that's probably not the chapter you would have wrote in your life. But, one thing I ask people lots of times is, what's the best thing cancer's done for you? Which is kind of a weird question, but you being around a lot of people who've went through this, what would you say the answer to that question would be for you?
Cancer has given me a lot of self-confidence. When I take a step back and think of all the things I've done in my life since that diagnosis, those were things, if I had rewound my life 15 years or 20 years, I don't know that I had the confidence to do those things. To, quite honestly, make a difficult decision to end a marriage. Mm-hmm. And realize that I was not happy after 20 plus years.
Right.
And I do regret on some ways, that didn't happen, but I made a decision that impacted me. And, granted that was right before I was diagnosed, but that was kind of the first step. But then to go seek out love, to start a podcast, not something I would have thought of to do before, and find people like yourself, like you have done all over the world, to share their stories, to speak, to go out and become a public speaker. I've had the opportunity on several occasions to be on a stage and share my story in front of hundreds of people. all things that I never would have thought to do prior to being diagnosed with cancer. So it's given me really a boost of self-confidence that I don't know that I had before.
Out of all your moments that you've had with this, I think healing starts from your lowest moment. And, when you're at your lowest, you're like, bells go off in certain ways, or either someone sees you and try to help provide you with that healing. What would you say maybe one of your lowest moments has been over the past 8 years or so since you've had to deal with this disease? And how did you overcome that lowest point?
This may sound really trite and lacking in sincerity, but my low moments have literally been moments. Mm-hmm. It's like a moment, nothing that's lasted more than a day. It's like, all right, we're going to get through this and on to the next. And I've just managed to, as you mentioned earlier, there's never been a time where I didn't realize that there was somebody out there struggling a whole lot more than I was. Mm-hmm. And that's what has kept me grounded. And certainly getting that phone call that the cancer metastasized and getting through 6 months of chemo, thinking, okay, now we're done. And then 6 months goes by and then I find out, another diagnosis. Now you got challenges. It's in your lungs now. And I was like, really? Yeah. And a day or two, and then all right, let's get it done. And finding out, all right, the treatment's just going to kind of be localized, and we're gonna hit it for a few days, and then you'll be good. It was like, oh, okay, we can move on. And I've been so fortunate compared to so many out there who are really struggling. Mm-hmm. That I just can't have a really in-depth, deep, dark time. I just don't allow myself to do it. And I don't think that's being in denial. It's just my mental outlook. And it's just, all right, let's get this done, move on. And let me just continue to focus on all the good things that I am thankful for that I have. And that's how I've handled it. And there really haven't been those deep, dark times for me.
It sounds like that the strong mindset you have is almost an impenetrable barrier. The low moments that may happen may get through the first layer, but they don't get any further, which I think is great because that comes over time of conditioning yourself and, going through all the things that you've went through in your life prior to cancer and then during the cancer and it's hard to explain. I'm probably something that only you and I will understand. But when you talk to people all the time who have cancer, it definitely, this may sound weird, but it makes you a better person because it makes you really realize like what's going on out there. And, how you see different ways people are dealing with things, and you may take some of that and deal with a little bit of the anxiety you may have on certain things, but we're constantly learning from other people, which I feel like that makes me a better person. And the stories that I hear, like it's all building me up, I think, more and more as well. Do you feel that way too when you talk to people?
No doubt. No doubt I do. And, the other thing that keeps my mindset this way is perspective. Mm-hmm. And, you're just a short time into your podcast, Truett. I've had 4 former guests that are no longer with us. So you want a little bit of perspective. 4 people with amazing stories to tell who aren't here anymore. Your recent guest, Sarah DeBoard, who I consider to be a dear friend as well, when she and I were talking and I told her I was going in for lung surgery, she said, and I'll paraphrase, wow, lucky you. Because she's not a surgical candidate.
Right.
And to have someone tell you that you're lucky, and I do that in air quotes, that you can have surgery, what more perspective do you need?
I'm not looking forward to that day when I look back on the people I've interviewed that someone has passed away. And when you talk to terminal people, it's sometimes some of the terminal people that I speak with, they have a better outlook on life than than most people that I talk to, and which is kind of sounds crazy, right? But the first time, it's never easy. It's never a good thing. But when someone does, pass away that you've interviewed, like what does that feel like? Oh, just to know that you've had that moment with someone, that their legacy can kind of live on through your show in a way. That's the first thing I think of. But what do you feel like as the person who's interviewed them?
No doubt. Of the 4 people that have passed away, and I do want to just share their names.
Yeah.
Sue Cadera, Sherry Gravesmith, Nate Allen, and Dr. Tom Marsilia. 2, Sue and Sherry, I never met. So there was a little bit less of a connection to the 2 that I did meet, Nate and Tom, and I met them at the Colorectal Cancer Alliance Stage 4 Symposium in Arizona in 2016, I think it was 2015, 2016. Met them both, and I was going through some pictures, and there's a picture of me with both of them, and they're both gone. So when you lose someone that you've met and had the chance to talk to and look at eye to eye, that's hard. It's hard. It really is. And you know the work that they were doing and how inspiring they were. And when Tom passed away, a friend of mine she called me to tell me that he had passed. And she was hysterical crying. And she said, how do we keep doing this? Because she does a lot of advocacy work too. And I said, how do we not do this? What better way to honor their legacy than to continue to share these stories for those people that need to hear them?
Yeah, I can. Just talking to people, so when we speak with people who are all over the world, right? People that you may never ever meet, lots of times I develop an immediate friendship with them. I'm sure you feel the same way. All of us who have had cancer, we all, we can all wink at each other and say, we get it. You don't have to say too much. There's no icebreaker when it comes down to meeting someone with cancer. Right. But you develop a true sense of caring for the other person, because immediately you already know, no matter what type of cancer they have, it's not easy. And all of the things that you have to unpack cancer will hit you in a divorce. It'll hit you when, a relative's died or whatever else has happened. It never picks the perfect time, but there's no perfect time. But, the relationships that I've been able to build with certain people that I would probably never have had contact with before have just done some amazing things for me. And just, it spreads your network out a lot, and the people that you get to develop and I know we both live in the South, right? So we, I don't know if you were always raised in the South or anything like that.
No, I'm a New Yorker by birth, but
all right. So I've always
grew up in Florida,
and then in the Georgia area. We get comfortable down here, right? We don't venture out too much. But the people I've spoken to all over the world, man, it's just really dramatically changed my concept on things. But it's given me a lot of reassurance, because with as divided as a lot of the media that we consume is now, we're doing something that it unites people. We're talking about something that's uniting people versus dividing people. And it's not a great thing that all unites us, but it's an authentic conversation with someone who's experiencing one of the toughest things in their life, and we're being able to share their story. And lots of times with me, it seems like it's cathartic for the actual interviewee to be able to share their story and you could, if you see this sometimes, you see something kind of twinkle in their eye and I've never thought about that, or I've never spoke about that, or they're unpacking a little bit of that emotional grief or emotional, support that they needed at that moment. So the podcast really helps tear down those walls, build up those relationships, connect us all together. And that's probably one of the things that I love the most. Do you ever have moments like that with people?
All the time. And it's cathartic for both of us, right?
Yeah,
it really is. It helps both of us. And like you, I hear those words. Wow, that's a great question, right?
Yeah.
And I hadn't thought of that. And it is an opportunity for people to, to share a little and to, as you said, unpack some things that maybe they hadn't before. I interviewed Kyle Woody, who is actually Sarah DeBoer's ex-husband, and he does a support group up in Minnesota called Jack's Caregivers. Mm-hmm. And I never forget when I interviewed Kyle, he put it so perfectly. He says, most guys don't want to sit around in a circle and talk about their feelings.
So true.
Yeah, you're probably right. So this gives, men and women, of course, that opportunity to do that.
So someone in your current situation who's, it's been 8 years, you just went through a lung surgery recently. Is that correct?
I had 2 this year. The most recent one was right before Thanksgiving, and I'm almost recovered.
Right.
Almost recovered. Yeah.
Are they removing nodules whenever they go in? Or is that what they're doing?
They call it yes, they do that via what they call a wedge resection. So they take, lop off a section of the lung. So I had the left lung done in July, and the same thing in the right lung late November.
So you're recovering from the surgery now. It's just part of life for you as you're moving forward. Where do you see, your podcast, which is called We Have Cancer Podcast? I don't think I've mentioned that yet. Where do you see your podcast going in the future, and what kind of goals do you have as you currently go through treatment? It puts you on the ground level, right? With a lot of the people that we speak with, as you currently go through it, where do you see your podcast going over the next year or two, or what do you want it to do in the long-term legacy of your life?
So I'll answer the second question first. Is boy, Linda and I are hoping to hear those 3 letters in 2019, NED.
Yes.
We haven't heard those in a while. And so my next scan's coming up late February, and hopefully we'll get good news there. I don't see why we wouldn't, but right. We're ready for a break, and we're ready to hear those 3 letters, hopefully for a long, long time. And in terms of the podcast, I just want to continue to grow, reach more people. The reason why we rebranded in May of 2018 from the Colon Cancer Podcast to We Have Cancer was to expand that reach. And It's so great now to be able to share the stories of people who are dealing with all kinds of cancer from all walks of life, from all locations. So we just want to continue to expand that reach. I believe there's a book in the making of the stories that I've been able to, hear and share on the podcast. Yeah. So that's something I'm shooting for this year, is to work on that and just continue to connect more people and inspire more people.
Yeah. I think that's so awesome. I feel like storytelling has so many healing qualities to it. And when you're getting the poison of chemotherapy or the burning of the radiation or the surgery or whatever else, like your body's physically trying to fight that and heal, right? And for me, I feel like I heal physically faster than we do emotionally in a lot of ways. And, I know just for me is whenever I was done with all of my treatment, I wasn't done mentally with dealing with everything. And it took me a while just to laugh. When a movie was funny, I wouldn't laugh. It's just one of those moments where you don't realize how there's still a lot of recovery left with that. And I think storytelling, and my goal is to have the podcast be a part of, treatment for people, because as you're sitting in that chemo chair, what are you going to do? You can sleep. You can watch a movie. I feel like I watched every movie that was out at the time, when you have so much downtime.
I can't watch The Property Brothers one more time.
Right.
That just seemed to be always on when I was doing chemo. Love those guys, but, it just brings back memories.
Right, exactly. And there's certain taste I have, too. I'm sure you like that, too. There's certain things you can't drink or whatever. I can't drink anything that tastes like the colon prep stuff, like lemon lime Gatorade.
Oh, no thanks.
Oh no thank you. But I hope people see that the emotional side, is just as important as the physical side in a lot of ways. And again, there's so many chemicals that get released in the brain whenever you hear a certain story, and the way it impacts you and affects you. And, I know you've talked to people who the better mindset and outlook you have, typically the better you tolerate treatment a lot of the times. Like a lot of the side effects you'll see from chemotherapy, like people will have less side effects if they have a, more positive state of mind and things like that. I know that's not a really measurable thing, but when you're talking to people, and I've spoken to doctors and nurses before, that the people that come in with the best attitude tend to have better results in a lot of ways. And, I'd love to have, shows like ours be a part of that process with hospitals and, doctors and stuff, to be able to recommend things like that to people, because it's such an important thing.
No doubt. I'm right there with you. And, I always said, especially when I was doing the colon cancer specific show, it's like, I'd love to have, a pamphlet that the oncologist handed out. Hey, you need to go listen to this too. So I think you and I are absolutely on the same wavelength, and I agree, because it is just another support system. And I don't know what your experience was. I did look into, all right, well, what's out there if I do want to get some support outside of my wife and immediate family. And what I found was it was overwhelmingly breast cancer only.
Yep.
Or the ones that were general were all taking place during the day. There was no acknowledgement that you could be dealing with cancer and still be working.
Right.
And I worked a full-time job, did not miss a day of work throughout my treatment. Now, if I had treatment, I would go in early or go in late, depending on what time treatment was. But I was like, all right, but I work, and there's nothing in the evening if I wanted to go sit in a circle and share my feelings. Right. No, there wasn't. And, Tampa is a fairly large-sized metropolitan area. So if there's nothing like that in the Tampa Bay area, I'm sure there's nothing for people in smaller communities. So again, what you and I are doing I believe is a great thing, because there's not as much support out there as you think there is. I don't believe.
Oh my gosh, I know. And it's surprising in a way, and again, I think it may be one of those things where it can be such a depressing topic that people kind of stay away from it. I had a guy one time I interviewed, he was pitching a show or something that he was trying to do. He had testicular cancer. And the guy that he was pitching the show to is like, look, no one wants to listen to someone talking about cancer. That was exactly what the producer said. He's like, it's depressing. People don't want to listen to that. They want happy, entertaining, exciting, fun things to talk about. But, we're not sitting here with the violin playing the whole time we're talking to people. The stories that people have are relatable, they're real, and then there's so much hope that adds into it. Like you said earlier, it's been 8 years for you. Like we said, everybody doesn't make it 8 years kind of situation. And they look at you as, well, if he can do it, then I can do it. And, I feel like it only takes one person to really change someone's life. And, the hundreds of people that you've interviewed, you've seen that happen with, someone's story really change someone else's life. And, we're the producer of that in a way, which I think, and you'll know what I'm talking about, when a lot of people don't know how much work it takes to put out a podcast, from the recording to the editing to the marketing to the everything, the equipment, all that stuff that goes with it. We put
and the expense.
Yeah, exactly. We put a tremendous amount of effort into this, and, we don't have to do this, but we feel called and led to do something like this. And just that raw passion alone, I think people can see that, and, they feel that through your show. I know I felt that through your show when I was listening to it. Listen to your show, you really, truly care about the person that you're talking to, and they know that. And again, that goes, I know we're not psychiatrists or psychologists or anything like that, but sometimes we kind of are in a way as we're talking to people. But, I just think it's so amazing what you've been able to do for so many years, and to be the pioneer. It's always hard to go first and to build those relationships and to talk to people and to do everything that you've done, because there's no blueprint. You're having to make the blueprint up along the way. And it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. And 4 years ago, podcasting was not nearly as large as it is right now. So that in itself, like the conferences and all those things weren't happening as much as they are now, and people don't talk about it and have the programs and everything else they do now and stuff. So I think it's amazing. We're not, there's not like a competition or anything like that. Like we just see the need. Like there could be 20 more cancer podcasts and not be enough, because there's so many people out there that are affected by this, that need to have that healing and stuff. And again, man, if you didn't do it in the very beginning, then I probably wouldn't have done it. So I'll, being number 2 coming in right after you or partnering up with you, like I just want to say I appreciate that, because
I appreciate the kind words too.
Thank you. You kind of laid out a blueprint of like, okay, there's somebody actually doing this. People are listening. There's a need. All the questions that you had to just hope you had or find the answers to as you went out there and stuff. So I think that's amazing. If people want to be a guest on your show, I know you make it really easy, and I know you love connecting with people. What is the best way for people to connect with you, through your site, through your social media and all that?
So we're everywhere. You can find me on Facebook, just under Lee Silverstein. Our Facebook page is We Have Cancer Show. On Twitter and Instagram, we're at We Have Cancer Pod. That's POD. And my website is wehavecancershow.com. And there is a link right on there. It says recommend a guest for the show. And certainly that guest that you're recommending could be yourself. Right.
I love the opportunity that you give to people, with your podcast and stuff. And again, I can't say enough about how important it is to acknowledge you for being the person that went first, to see the need, to try to solve a problem, to get out there and doing this. And your life in itself, from everything is kind of accumulates over life and has led up to where you're at right now and all the things that you're doing for people. So do you have like one or two things that you want to leave all of our listeners with today? And kind of maybe if there's a young adult out there, and I'm considering you a young adult, coming straight from you, that would help them as they experience their journey with cancer.
You touched on part of it, and that is, there are going to be those down times, and you can be in control of that, and you may struggle to find it, to find a way to feel good, especially mentally. And I walked into this thing and said, all right, here's how I'm going to feel good. I'm going to make other people feel good. And if I can make somebody else happy, make somebody else laugh, I know that's going to help me. And that's really where I focused. And I'll never forget, Truett, if I can tell a quick story, my very first chemo treatment, sometimes they refer to your drugs as your cocktail.
Right.
And I'm sitting in the chemo chair, the very first treatment, and I'm on the phone with one of my sisters. And the chemo nurse is not too far away, so she's only hearing part of the conversation. Mm-hmm. And I'm going, they said that I was getting a cocktail. I don't see any umbrella in this darn thing. No straw, no umbrella. This is nonsense, And the nurse thought I was ticked off. She didn't hear the whole story. So, I'm making this joke about not having cocktails, at the infusion, because they told me I was getting a cocktail. And she looked at me like she thought I'd lost my mind. But that was the approach that I took. And I made sure, to remember everybody's name there and how's your day going and tell me about your kids. And because you told me something the last time I was here, and brought in cookies and brownies the last day of treatment, for all of them. And so that is something that's in your control. It sucks hearing those 3 words, and I've heard them more times than I can count.
Right.
But you can influence how this goes to some degree. And it, in the video that you referenced before we hit record, that's up on my Facebook page, I talk about the word age, about being proud of my age. And I use that as an acronym, with the A standing for attitude, the G for gratitude, and E for exercise. And those 3 things, focusing on my attitude by providing gratitude and finding a way to do some sort of exercise, even with that pump attached to my waist, is what helps get me through.
Yeah. Well, you look great, man. I don't know how old you are. I'm not going to ask you either, but
I'm 58 and I'm proud of it.
There you go. 58 going on 35 over there. So. No, man, you look good. You're doing great. I'm really thankful for your wife as well too, for all the support she's given you. So tell her a complete stranger appreciates her for what she's been able to do to help support you.
I would do that. And I'm so glad that you've launched your show, the 1% Podcast. You know, it's the same thing. I've got so many friends in the podcasting space, and trust me, you know, when a guy who does a real estate podcast sees someone else is doing a real estate podcast, they don't get upset. It's like, you know, there's plenty to go around for all. And if I don't reach them and you do, or you reach them first and then I do, who cares, right?
Yeah.
It's what's going on at the end, and that's that we're providing that you know, some hope and some inspiration and helping people feel like they're not alone. And the more we can do that, the better.
I love it, man. Well, Lee, thanks for taking time today to share your story and talk about your podcasts. And, you know, again, I appreciate everything that you've done. We'll continue to follow up with you. So you said February is when you're having your next round of tests?
Third week of February, yeah.
Okay, perfect. I got that jotted down over here on my notes, so I'll be sure to follow up with you on that. We'll post some happy news hopefully in the next month or so about you and everything that you got going on. So thanks again for being a part of the 1% Podcast, Lee, and we'll follow up with you really soon, okay?
Thanks, Truett. Be well.
We appreciate you spending time with us on today's episode and encourage you to continue the conversation to help you keep pushing forward. For more resources based on today's episode, as well as ways to recommend a guest and connect to Truett personally, head over to 1%podcast.com. Be sure to join us next time for more stories of inspiration right here with Truett Taylor on the 1% Podcast.